I'm old enough that I remember my father telling me about this wonderful labor leader and pointing to pictures of him in the newspaper. And the name stuck in my mind because my father was so excited. The man's name was Mike Quill, and he was a leader of your union. Is there anything like, let's call it for lack of a better term, a resurgence or a remembrance or a return to the kind of leadership and followership that Mike Quill represented?
I believe that there's a resurgence in consciousness among working people that the trade union movement is necessary, perhaps like never before, certainly on the economic side, but COVID-19 has raised an awareness among working people that a collective approach to the bosses is necessary to save lives during this age of COVID-19. If it were not for the trade union movement, if it were not for workers standing together back to back, thousands more would have perished during COVID-19. I think when this pandemic is behind us, there's going to be a massive organizing boom in America. We're seeing that already. Our phones are ringing off the hook, particularly in the transport sector, about workers trying to join the trade union movement. Right now, the TWU and many of our sister unions are doing a lot of virtual organizing, which we would have never been able to do before, but for trying to figure out new ways of doing business in the age of this pandemic. So workers have lifted their heads off the pillow, so to speak, and have come to a full understanding about how important this trade union movement is. And I think we are going to see a new age of workers standing up to the bosses, standing up in such a way that they're not going to let the bosses kill them. And this pandemic has had a lot to do with it.
Could you just, John, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is so important. Could you help us? Why is this happening? Given what you've just said, how would you help us understand why workers are feeling more pro-union, for lack of a better term?
Just in this transport sector alone, in public transit, in the airline industry, in the railroad industry, in those sectors alone, the indifference, the lack of care, the desire to either make a profit or the depraved indifference of not wanting to provide a mask or basic sanitary workplace conditions of these bosses, which led to workers getting sick and perishing in the line of duty to COVID-19. And the only way, in many cases, of workers to go home in one piece at night, not spread COVID-19 to their families, was to stand together and fight back. And workers in unions survive much better than workers not in unions. Workers in unions were able to get access to sanitary conditions and masks in ways that workers not in unions were not able to. So just in that way, now we're facing catastrophic economic conditions. Workers in unions are faring much better than workers who are not in unions. It doesn't take a rocket scientist if you're a worker, and workers are certainly, workers have a high intellect. They look around and they see the treatment that workers in unionized industries are getting, and they want it. And they're going to get it too. There's a long tradition in Europe on the left, and the social democracies of Western Europe, the culture in Western Europe has led to this. This is not the first time this happened, right? This short-term work programs has happened in the 2008 recession across Europe. There's just a long-term culture of supporting businesses and supporting workers that doesn't exist over here. And isn't that the shame of it, that the Republicans in the United States would call the European socialists? And meanwhile, these socialists in Europe did so much more to support businesses and families. Right. These so-called Republicans in the United States and their family values are shamed by what they would view as socialists in Europe that supported families and small businesses across the board and kept people on the payroll. And in one of the great cruel ironies of life in Europe, they kept families on the payroll where medical benefits are provided by the government. In the United States, the Republicans kicked people off the payroll where you basically had to stay on the payroll in order to maintain your health benefits, where it's absolutely backwards.